Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be taking a look at how to write speech. Now specifically this video has been designed for anyone that is in the level 1 to level 2 kind of bracket for functional skills English, and the video is going to look at some of the key methods to really step up your writing and take it to that next level. Writing a speech can be quite difficult, so let's take a look together and go through it at a slow pace. Now if you haven't done so already, please could you like and subscribe, it really does help us out when you do so. Look at the images. What techniques or methods are needed for a successful speech? And if you can, try and stretch and challenge yourself and think, can you recall a famous speech? And then think about it in a little bit more depth. So what actually made it effective? What kind of techniques that made it stand out in your mind? What techniques really helped it to convey the message to the audience? Now if you want to pause the video here and take a bit of time, please feel free to do so. We are going to explore these in more detail in the rest of the video. By the end of the video, you'll be able to understand the different types of sentence structure, analyze a response for deeper understanding, and finally apply understanding to practice writing a speech. What is speech writing and how does it relate to the exam? So speech writing is the method of conveying a thought or message to a reader using the correct punctuation and expression. Speech writing is a key form of writing that may appear on the writing exam. This is often considered one of the hardest forms of writing. It also helps build some of the key skills needed for speaking and listening. So with that in mind then, try and think about what kind of methods or techniques would you expect to find in a speech. Again, if you're able to actually think of any that are quite famous or that stand out to you, try and have a think or even research them or watch them on YouTube, for example, and think what actually makes them effective. And then we need to think about applying that technique to our own writing. New learning. Using sentence structure. Look at the two examples and attempt the challenges that follow. So what we've got here is two typical examples that are going to be based on the actual writing assessment that we're going to be using today. So as I read through them, I just want you to think about the challenges at the bottom here. So first of all, we've got two examples. So which example is the most effective? And then the super challenge, how has the use of punctuation affected our understanding? So think about how they sound, the tone of my voice as I read them, and the impact that it's leaving the reader. Both of them are saying the same things, but the way they're being communicated is very different. So firstly then, if we look at the top one, it says, I think vaping is disgusting. There is nothing worse than breathing in the sickly sweet smell as someone blows smoke around you. All I want to do is snatch them from people and throw them away. We must ban them now. Okay, so that's the first one. You can see there that we don't have much punctuation. The sentence structure is kind of all over the place really. We don't have a lot of punctuation to help break it down and to digest it. Now if you think about the second one, for example, it should hopefully sound more effective. So it says then, I think vaping is disgusting. There is nothing worse than breathing in that sickly sweet smell as someone blows smoke around you. All I want to do is snatch them from people and throw them away. We must ban them now. So try and think about how the slight change of the punctuation, the varying of the sentence structure, ultimately changes our understanding, the emotions felt by the writer or the reader in this case, and what they're trying to communicate to their audience. Sentence structure. Make notes on the different types of sentences. So hopefully you would have understood from the previous task that with the two examples, the first one lacked a lot of punctuation and also the sentence structure wasn't very detailed, so all of the sentences, the ideas, they were relatively the same length, so they didn't really think about which elements they wanted to emphasise to have a greater impact on the audience. Now the way that we can change this, the way that we can add a little bit of excitement or a little bit of pace to our writing is by varying the sentence structure. So we have three types essentially. We have a simple sentence, a compound sentence, and a complex sentence. Now this is all you really need to know for level 2 functional skills and also kind of up to GCSE as well. So essentially it goes a simple sentence, nice and short, a compound sentence, slightly larger, and a complex one is going to be even larger still. So we've got our dictionary definitions here, so if you want to pause it and go through, feel free, and I'll just read through them in a bit more detail as well. So a simple sentence is a sentence that is made up of just one independent clause. They're made up of just one subject and often only a single verb. Simple sentences are the most basic of the 4 different sentence types. So essentially they're going to have a very simple idea. So I went to the shops, full stop. Now when we move on to the compound sentence, this is where we're adding to our simple sentence. It's actually going to get larger and no longer be a simple sentence but actually grow and become a compound. So a compound sentence is a sentence that connects 2 independent clauses, typically with what we call a coordinating conjunction, and those are words with like, and, or, and but. Essentially, it's one thing that adds another idea to another idea. So compound normally means 2 things coming together, and that's quite a good way to think about it with your sentences. Now, a complex sentence. So this is a sentence with 1 independent clause and at least 1 dependent clause. So if you're not sure what we mean by that, an independent clause is an idea that can exist by itself. It makes 100% sense by itself. A dependent clause is an extra idea that you need that other part of the sentence. So we're talking about really quite a long idea as well. So it works best when you need to provide more information to explain or to modify your sentence's main point. Now if you're still a little bit unsure about this, please do check out the worksheet that is included in the link below. All you need to do is click it and it should be able to take you through to it, where you can complete some additional tasks just to make sure that that is firm in your mind. Now what we're going to do is we're going to think about our writing assessment. So this is a very typical assessment that you might face in the level 1 or level 2 writing exam. Okay, so it says then, your college has asked you to write a speech about the dangers of smoking or vaping. In your speech you should write in the form of a speech, write in a clear, coherent sentences, use a range of sentence forms, use a range of effective language techniques. And you can see there, down the bottom in bold, we've got the recommended word count. Very typical kind of amount that you'd expect us to write for level 1, level 2. That's 200 to 250 words. That's roughly about half a page, maybe a little bit more than that. So a good thing to think about when faced with a task like that is what DeForest techniques would work well in the speech. Now if you're not too sure about it, we're going to go over it in more detail in just a moment. Learning recap. Look at the DeForest techniques. Which ones would be effective in a speech? Now in our previous videos we've gone through DeForest techniques quite a lot, so if you haven't 100% grasped what we mean by them yet, don't worry about it too much because we're going to keep on going through them when we're going through our writing assessment tasks like this. So with DeForest then, each one of these letters stands for a key technique. So DeForest will stand for the following things. So the D, this often change depending on who you have as your teacher. Generally speaking, it'll either be direct address or discourse markers. We then have alliteration, facts, opinion, rhetorical question, repetition, emotive language, statistics, and triplet. Now, you don't need to use every single one of these in your exam, but generally speaking, the more you use, the more effective your writing is going to be. So all I want you to think about now, just very quickly, which of these would be the most effective, have the most impact in a speech? Which ones will be the best tools to employ to help convey our message to our best ability? If you want to pause the video now and have a think, try and come up with your own ideas, please feel free to do so. I'm now going to show you my answers and try and actually explain the rationale behind it. So why do I think those things are going to be the most important? Before we do that as well, remember the teacher's top tip. So remember that a speech is intended to be read to an audience. What techniques would help us to connect with them? Class feedback. Check your understanding against the teacher's ideas. So I've purposely not used all of the DeForest techniques. I understand that generally speaking, when you are in an exam, it can be difficult to get all of them down. So these are the specific ones that I would use if I was writing a speech. So firstly, I'd use direct address or discourse markers. So if you're not too sure what I mean by this, so direct address allows us to connect with the audience and speak directly to them. So it's essentially when you use words like you or we, and it just helps them to get that feel that you're actually speaking to them, even if it might be with a big crowd or a big audience that you're directing it to. Discourse markers. Now this allows me to have a balanced argument, so that might say, I think vaping is bad, however, it is probably a better alternative to actually smoking cigarettes. That is a really good thing to use because it allows you to seem more personable if you can understand both pros and cons around a situation. Emotive language. Now, this is a good technique because it allows me to create a reactionary response from the audience. This is using words that's going to get an actual emotional response from the audience. So for example, if I was to say that vaping can lead to a serious illness, all of us, or at least most of us who care about our health, should have an emotional reaction to the word illness. And statistic. Now, for me, really, statistics are one of the best techniques that you can use for any form of writing, because to be honest, it's hard to argue with numbers. That being said as well, with your writing you can make up statistics, because you're not expected to know every single thing about any topic that could ever come up. So for example, you might not know much about vaping, for example, but you could say 80% of people who vape do suffer with a long-term illness. Now, I'm not sure if that's true necessarily, but because I've used those numbers to support that idea, it sounds more believable. A triplet. A triplet is where we've got three ideas or three adjectives towards one goal, and this helps emphasize the point you're making, and it can be used in an effective complex sentence. And the final one I'd use would be a rhetorical question. It kind of works a little bit like a direct address in that it actually helps engage the audience quite a bit. So this shows an awareness of the audience and engaging them on the topic you want them to question. So rather than you just talking at them, rhetorical question allows them to actually think about what you're trying to say and have that moment just to have that internal conversation and really go through in their own mind what it is they believe or what they need to question regarding your topic. Look at the response below and attempt the challenges that follow. So here we have a response to the question that we just went through, and as we're going to read through it, I'd like to consider the following challenges. So first of all, has the response used a varied sentence structure? Identify any DeForest techniques used in the example. And finally, rewrite the opening paragraph and carry on the response using a range of techniques and varying the sentence structure for effect. So in our next part of the video, what we're actually going to do is we're going to view the feedback given by the teacher. So I wouldn't have a go at the mega challenge until we've done that. You can fully understand what it needs to do to improve. So it says then, good afternoon boys and girls. I'm here today to talk to you about the dangers of vaping. I understand that many of us need to cope with stress, but is vaping really the only way? Let me get straight to the point. Vaping is expensive, disgusting, and disastrous for your health. In 2023, the National Health Agency reported that over 80% of teenagers use a vape. That's a truly shocking statistic. 80%. Is it any wonder that stress, anxiety, and poor health is on the rise? Let's act now. Let's act together to stop all of our futures going up in smoke. So if you want to pause the video here and go through it at your own time, please feel free to do so. We're now going to jump ahead and have a look at the teacher's comments to see what went well and even better riff, so how this response can be improved. Class feedback. Check your answers against the teacher's feedback. So here we have our same response then on the left hand side, and this is the first thing the teacher has addressed. So first of all, we always start off with something positive because there's always a good thing to do. First of all, there's not always going to be things that are absolutely terrible. We should always focus on the good things first. So the response has been written in the form of a speech. Now the only way we know that, we've only got 2 paragraphs to go on, but we can see that they've used an appropriate salutation or greeting when they've said good afternoon. So they clearly know that in order to start a speech you need to address the audience first of all. The candidate is written in a clear and concise manner. So what we mean by that is that they've written full sentences and they've used paragraphs, so it makes logical sense to the audience. Some language techniques have been used effectively. Now this is interesting. When an English teacher says some, they mean there's been a few, but there haven't been loads. So let's think about the actual techniques that we're using here. So, good afternoon boys and girls. I'm here today to talk to you about the dangers of vaping. Again, that's where we're going into that nice and clear and concise explanation. I understand that many of us need to cope with stress, but is vaping really the only way? So we've got a nice rhetorical question in the first paragraph there. Let me get straight to the point. Vaping is expensive, disgusting, and disastrous for your health. So we actually have one of our key techniques there of a triplet: expensive, disgusting, and disastrous. It's used quite effectively as well. In 2023, the National Health Agency reported that over 80% of teenagers use a vape. So we have a nice use of a statistic there. This is a truly shocking statistic. 80%. Is it any wonder that stress, anxiety, and poor health? So we've got another triplet. stress, anxiety and poor health is on the rise. Let's act now, let's act together to stop all of our futures should be going up in smoke. So not too bad in terms of the response. This is quite an interesting line at the bottom actually, because they've used a little bit of a pun or a play on words here, because vaping causes smoke and it's talking about the future going up in smoke. So they have used some techniques, but we've only got 2 paragraphs, so we don't really get a full range of how many techniques they've used, or if they've actually just used those ones, or if they're going to go on and use a lot more. So it really is quite limited by what we understand due to the amount that they've wrote. Okay, then next then, so we have some more feedback to think about then. So the response has been written in paragraphs. Okay, so that's a very positive thing to focus on. And then EBI, the response needs to show a better awareness of the audience. Now the only thing really that stands out is that if you think back to the question was asking you to write to colleges, and they've actually started it with boys and girls. Now generally speaking, when we say boys and girls, we normally think of people who are under the age of 13, right? So if it was me personally, I always think it's better to sound more respectful. Even if they're like 15, 16, I'd rather say ladies and gentlemen, just to make sure that you're actually talking to that audience and showing them that respect as you go on in the explanation. The candidate needs to vary their sentence structure to be more effective in their writing. So this is a really big mistake that's happening in this one. It's not necessarily going to cause them to fail at level 1, maybe not even at level 2, but it is something that needs to be addressed if you want a really good mark for your writing, or if you want to go on to GCSE. And one of the biggest bits that kind of come into it there is that it really isn't breaking it down. So for example, in the first paragraph where it says let me get straight to the point, we should have a colon there to separate it. This is allowing a pause so that we can just take that little beat and just read and emphasize to the audience what our main point is. So that is that vaping is expensive. We should have a comma there as well. Disgusting and disastrous for your health. So without the pause, we're not really getting the full effect of the words there. In 2023, the National Health Agency reported that 80% of teenagers use a vape. Okay, nice and straightforward. This is a truly shocking statistic, 80%. So we need either a short sentence here or an exclamation mark. So an exclamation mark would work well to show the anger and shock felt by the reader. Having that pause there also allows the audience to really think this through. 80%, a massive statistic here, that teenagers are going to be having some real kind of health issues if 80% of them are actually smoking or vaping with this kind of thing. Is it any wonder that stress, anxiety and poor health is on the rise? There should be a rhetorical question there as well. So not only the sentence structure, but also the punctuation is lacking a bit now. Let's act now. I would say maybe a full stop. Let's act now. Sounds very punchy if you have a nice short sentence. Let's act now. Pause. Let's act together. Full stop. To stop all of our futures from going up in smoke. So again, I just need to address that little bit at the end and think about the pace. Again, a good idea is to read it out loud, because that's really going to help emphasize the points they need to make. Now, if you want to go through this in more depth, please feel free to do so. We're now going to jump ahead to the next part. So in terms of our next lesson, we have lessons every single week, but if you're specifically looking for our how-to series, so that's going specifically through things like articles, blogs, speeches, reports, all those other kind of difficult things, this is what we're going to focus on in our next how-to video. So we're going to look at how to write a report. We're going to look at the difference between persuasive writing and informative writing, and we're going to think about how to construct a response for academic success, always thinking about the assessment, always thinking about the level 1, level 2 writing assessment. Now if you want to catch that video, the next video will be released on the 6th of the 10th, so that's not this Friday, but the Friday after that. You can check out all our other videos as well, so please do check out the rest of them. We do go through a lot of these things in them as well. Now if you need any support or any additional help, the new videos will be added every single week. Alternatively, leave us a comment, like and subscribe, or check out our partner channel Bookworm Teaching for more lessons and guidance on all things English. Thanks ever so much for listening guys, and all the best with your work and revision in the future. Bye bye.